My name's Leanne Despodes, and I'm the president of the Historical Society. So one of my duties is I have to do this for each meeting. Sometimes I can palm it off, but not usually. And tonight our program is about golf, in Bailey's Harbor especially. And I had to do a little bit of research on that. And I found out that golf has been a part of American life since the 18th century. A golf club was founded in South Carolina in 1786. By 1884, it had spread across the country, including a course in Tacoma, Washington. The United States Golf Association held the first U.S. Amateur Championship and the first U.S. Open for pros in 1895. And that was big news to me. I had no idea. In 1913, the U.S. Open at the Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts, was supposed to be a showcase for the top pros of the time. But the winner, in spite of all the most famous golfers actually across the world who were there, the winner turned out to be Francis Ouimet, a 20-year-old hometown amateur backed up by a 10-year-old caddy. It was the most significant championship in American golf history, according to Michael Trostel, who's a curator and historian of the USGA. Trostel also pointed out that Ouimet's humility and his working class roots were something you didn't see a lot at that time in the game. Golf was perceived as a game exclusively for the wealthy and the elite. Ouimet helped break that perception. Following this particular game, over 2 million Americans took up the game of golf over a very few years. The story of that game can be enjoyed through a 2005 movie called The Greatest Game Ever Played. They tied, the two players from England were supposed to be the very, very top, and he tied with them the first day, and then the second day they had to play another 18. And at that time, I think in the movie, it indicates that he won by 1 stroke, but actually he won by about 5. Northern Door County began enjoying golf soon after this. Peninsula State Park's course opened in 1917, and the Alpine at Egg Harbor offered golf as an activity in 1925. Chris Shorer, our presenter tonight, is the great-granddaughter of Bailey's Harbor pioneers Jim and Ann McCardle, and the great niece of Mike McCardle, who built the golf course. She has done several excellent presentations for us with the help of her faithful sidekick husband, Jim. And her attention to detail and her ability to tell a good story always make me think that she must have been every teacher's favorite student. Now, Chris will tell you how some old friends put their heads and resources together at the beginning of the Great Depression to create a beautiful golf venue in Bailey's Harbor.
Thank you so much, Leanne.
You're so welcome.
And it's fun to be here again, doing one of my favorite stories, the history of golf in Bailey's Harbor.
Okay, I just want to see if we have to adjust those lights.
This one or that one? Okay, no, it's fine.
Not
I'm
the
just
mic,
going to
the
turn this a
lights.
little bit. Okay, lights are fine.
Oh, okay.
Are you going to turn the other ones off?
Well, yeah, that's why we're waiting.
Okay, we'll wait for that. Whoa, here we go. Let's see, is this one on too? Okay. Maxwelton Braes Arbani. Maxwelton is a huge country home in Scotland. Braes are the rolling hills around that house. So the braes around Max Welton are bonny, which means they're just lovely. So it fits Door County perfectly. The Irish ballad of Annie Laurie has nothing to do with playing golf. But you'll see as we go along, it has a very distinct meaning to golf in Bailey's Harbor. As Leanne said, in the early 1900s, golf was beginning to be a very popular sport. Door County was coming into its own as a recreation area and followed the enthusiasm with several fledgling courses. In 1909, land was purchased for $20 an acre and Peninsula State Park was founded. The state officially established the park in 1910. In 1920, Albert Doolittle, park manager, built the first 9 holes, and they had sand and oil greens, and I did a little reading on that. You don't want those. They talked about putting down sand and pouring 2 barrels of oil over the top of it and letting it soak in, and I thought, oh, good, am I glad they changed that. It said it was a very interesting but very time-consuming surface. The second 9 holes were designed and built in 1929. In 1921, brothers Paul and John Birchinger opened the Alpine Resort in Egg Harbor on property they had once sold and then repurchased. In 1926, after an expansion of the resort, the brothers bought an existing golf course. It was adjacent to the Alpine property and had been built by Orrin Glidden under the supervision of Ed Cabot. They added a second 9 holes in 1948. And Bill Birchinger has been the owner and manager of the property since 1939. And I think Bill's about 90 years old right now. He was just a hoot when I talked to him. Realizing that this was the beginning of tourism in Door County, as well as the beginning of motorized transportation, the west side of the peninsula now offered several golf outings. Folks frequenting some of the early resorts on the east side of the peninsula had no local courses. In March of 1928, the Door County Advocate reported that Mr. Blakefield of Bailey's Harbor had been in the city. He was there to promote a golf course in Bailey's Harbor. Mr. Blakefield was contacting businessmen to join in the corporation for $15,000, which was a lot of money at that point, each to build a Bailey's Harbor Golf Club. He had taken an option on 52 acres of land at the triangle where County E and State Trunk Highway 17, which is now Highway 57, join, a most desirable location between Kangaroo Lake and Lake Michigan. The property was owned by Peter and Tom Collins. Unfortunately, the corporation was not successful, and the golfing and prospects in Bailey's Harbor in the east side of the peninsula seemed to have vanished. About this same time, Michael McCardle, a Bailey's Harbor native son, was visiting his family in Bailey's Harbor. McCardle was a successful businessman from Chicago. Just a little background information on Michael William McCardle. Michael was the 5th child and the 3rd son of James and Anna Fagan McCardle. And he's in the middle on the bottom row. The McCardles emigrated from Ireland in 1866. In 1871, the family moved to Bailey's Harbor to be near many of their other friends who came from Dundalk area of Ireland. They purchased 40 acres to farm along Highway 57 in the area of North Kangaroo Lake Road, and by 1895, Jim McCardle was working over 350 acres. Part of that property is what's part now of Bjorklanden, and part of it is part of the golf course. McCardle was born in Bailey's Harbor on October 6, 1874. He earned a high school diploma graduating at 15 in 1889 and Wisconsin teaching certificate in 1890. He taught for 2 years in the Sister Bay School and then moved to the Ellison Bay School for another 3. He received his master's teaching certificate in '93 from Oshkosh College and a law degree from the University of Wisconsin in 1901. He was employed settling land claims in the states of Montana and Washington. Briefly practiced law in Washington state and then moved on to Panama and worked for the U.S. government while the Panama Canal was being built. And I think my clicker man has got to give me another slide here. There he is. He was employed as a business correspondent and salesman in Chicago in late 1903. In 1905, Michael was hired by the Flexible Shaft Company of Chicago, and that company later became Sunbeam Corporation. In 1915, he was named general manager, and in 1927 was named president and chief executive officer of Sunbeam Corporation. In 1933, the Century of Progress exhibit was in Chicago, and the Flexible Shaft Company promoted its new line of home products under the Sunbeam name that we all recognize. Michael lived in Chicago and enjoyed all that it offered. He was an avid and accomplished golfer and belonged to the Westmoreland Country Club and the Bobolinks Golf Club. One of his trophies, in fact, are over here on the table. During his winter vacations in Mississippi, he frequently stayed at the Edgewater Golf Hotel, a golfing resort in Edgewater Park. His heart always was in his hometown of Bailey's Harbor, however, and he returned often to visit with his family and relax away from the big city. After one of his Mississippi vacations, he was visiting his family in Bailey's Harbor. Michael and his brother Jim sat at the kitchen table and talked about golf and how maybe they should have a golf course in Bailey's Harbor. They felt it was a good time to explore the possibility. The property they discussed was the same property that Mr. Blakefield had looked at. It just happened that much of this property had been the McCardle family farm. The boys had grown up on that farm. They walked the familiar land and then drew sketches of how the course would be laid out. We recently came across a letter that Michael had written to Peter Collins. He indicated to Peter that he was close to closing on land that the Jacobsons owned, and he felt he had paid pretty good prices to all the former landowners and felt Bailey's Harbor will soon have a golf course they can be proud of. He added that when the snow got off the ground up there, he said, let him know, and he can make a trip up with a fellow who knows a lot about laying out golf courses. He closed telling Peter he was a good salesman, and that 10 days ago, the idea of doing anything like this would never have happened. He advised Pete also that he would have to learn to play golf, and that would keep him young. Sometimes I think it frustrates us and makes us older as well. Well, Michael returned to Chicago and visited with the pro at his home course, Westmoreland Country Club, about his vision for this golf club in Bailey's Harbor. The next week, the two men came to Bailey's Harbor and looked over the property. His friend and course pro directed him to well-known golf course designers Joseph A. Roseman and George O'Neill. Joseph Roseman was contracted to be the designer, and dream had started to take shape. There were to be 18 holes, the first 9 on the west side of the highway, and the second on the east around the main clubhouse. The land required for the holes and other buildings was purchased, and the construction was begun in 1929. At this time, the Great Depression was in full swing, so the project was a great benefit to Bailey's Harbor. Local contractors, workers, and materials were specified to be used whenever possible during the construction process. Michael's brother James was his personal representative during the construction process. In the early spring of 1930, Michael McArdle was vacationing at the Edgewater Golf Hotel in Mississippi. After a round of golf, he and several friends were having dinner at the hotel. The dinner orchestra had a girl singer who started her program with the ballad of Annie Laurie. As she started to sing the opening lines, Maxwellton Braes our bonny, Michael turned to his friend J.W. Lynch and he said, "That's it, the name of the resort is going to be Maxwellton Braes." The golf course on the west side of the road was begun first. Teams of horses, slushers, and wagons were needed to move the stone and soil to build the golf course. The number of wagon parts, slushers, graders, crowbars, picks, axes, shovels, rakes, and buckets needed were supplied by Charlie Reinhardt's hardware store in Bailey's Harbor and Schofield's Hardware in Sturgeon Bay. Many of the farmers supplied the teams, equipment, and labor for the project. And this is one of the timesheets from Pete Collins' 2 teams. Old stories related that Archie Reinhardt was the first man to work on the course. He took down the stone fences and piled them to create many of the bunkers. So if you get in the bunkers, don't swing too hard because there's stone underneath them. Otto Pyle had 2 teams driven by his sons, Roland and Hans. They hauled sand from Hines Creek area for traps on the golf course. One of the horses dropped dead on the road. Other farmers who worked, and you'll see their names along here, they worked their teams were Walter Hine, Pete Collins, Walter Kinsella, Edward and Bill Apple, Joe Katersky, Bill Root, Freeland Tosland, Charlie Burlow, Walter Schultz, Green Carter, Ben Patsu from Jacksonport, Bill Kleck from Fish Creek worked with his tractor. Work continued on the East 9 as the first 9 was completed. Tom Goss from Kangaroo Lake worked a wagon and horse and planted birch trees on each side of the highway in the entrance to the clubhouse. Jim McArdle, Michael's brother, an overseer of the project, liked to tell stories of having to chase hoop snakes off the land as they were building the course. He said you had to take a switch to them. They would grab their tails in their mouth and roll away into the woods. Well, remember, he was an Irishman and had a great bit of Blarney in him. We found some correspondence between Michael's secretary and James McArdle, his personal representative on the job. One letter questions why persons were only carrying 1 bucket of water to the workers. Secretary felt they had 2 fine arms and should be able to carry 2 buckets of water at least. James replied that the secretary should come and try to carry the 2 buckets. Another questioned why Michael should pay for feed for the horses as they worked. James replied that if they weren't fed and the horses were watered as they worked, they would drop dead. Advised that unless the secretary had a team, he wasn't qualified to comment. We didn't find any other questions as to the management of the people or the animals. One note from a story about Maxwellton earlier on, noted from Roland Pyle, recalls like yesterday. He said, Regina LaPlante and other girls and men picking up stones on the fairway by hand and filling pails after the ground was leveled and before it was seeded for fairways and greens. And they had buckets, they'd pick them in and take them up and dump them, and they were paid by how many buckets they picked up. The greens and trees were planted with bent grass, which was not common in Wisconsin at that time. The pump house was located at the east end of the property at the edge of Lake Michigan, and you can just barely see it up at the top of this picture. The lake level was high, and water was pumped up to a half a mile to the golf course. As the water level receded, a hole was drilled behind the pump house at the base of the cliff on the beach to furnish water for the golf course, and it still comes up that pipe today. Milton Heinquinnet, year-round maintenance and caretaker, and Gordon Brand, greenskeeper, both worked at the golf course from its beginning for over 40 years. The course was heavily trapped in the beginning, and par was 72. There was a sand trap for every par stroke. It was considered a keen challenge for the professional golfer, not to mention the average player. As Door County's resort businesses grew and play increased by the average golfer, the number of traps were gradually reduced to 60 to make it conservative yet sporty for the good player. The course is now 6,070 yards and the par is 70. The west side was completed and opened to the public in 1930, and the second nine on the east side was completed in 1931. The famous 19th hole gave every guest a chance to win a medal for a hole-in-one when they completed their round. And this is a story that you can't do that today because the 19th hole is no longer there. The resort brochure later described it as the only real 19th hole in the world. After 18 holes of play, a golfer had only one shot for the 19th. The tee was just south of the 18th green, and it was 61 yards long. Excuse me, and the raised green was 18 feet across. The green was dished slightly toward the hole so that a ball pitched correctly would stay on the green and roll by gravity into the cup. The ball would travel down an underground tube, trick a mechanism that would deliver the player his ball, and a gold-plated bronze medal reading "Hole-in-One, Max Welton Braes Golf Course, Bailey's Harbor, Wisconsin," in the current year. Later versions of the medal were a silver-colored stamp coin. And Leanne's mother won one, and there is one of the gold ones over on the table over here, as well as one of the silver ones you might want to take a look at. As work was being done on the course, the clubhouse building was also under construction. The architects for the main building were Van Hoist and Elsmill of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Their plan featured a Tudor-style clubhouse using locally quarried limestone, a tea room at the entrance to the property, and 5 cottages situated behind the golf course on the path to the lake. Tennis courts and a garage facility for guests' vehicles and accommodation for their chauffeurs would also be part of the complex. Local farmers with their scoops dug out the basement after the stone was blasted. Frank Oldenburg was the carpenter contractor for the project. Working with him were Bill, Carl, and Gus Brungraber, Milton Heinquint, and Moritz Weiss. Homer Remeland of Sturgeon Bay did the plumbing and the heating. Nebel Electric of Sturgeon Bay did the electric. Ferdinand Jones Sr. and Jr. did the masonry work with Goldie Price as a helper. The stone was from Hogan's Quarry, east of Fish Creek. John Buchner and Albert Schneck worked as foundation and plasterers. They worked through the whole winter by throwing the sand over culverts with fires being burned underneath them to thaw and heat the sand. The work was completed, windows washed, and the resort was ready to open in the late spring of 1931. And these, you gotta go back one. These were the ladies and gentlemen that washed all the windows. And they made a fantastic salary. She of $19.35 and he of $22.50. Okay, next. Early brochures for Max Welton described the Tudor-styled clubhouse as a sylvan paradise set among wooded fastness, but its appointments are marvels of elegance and comfort. The original floor plan was a bit different from the current arrangement. The present cocktail lounge and kitchen was the pro shop and men's locker room and bar. Separate shower rooms were available so golfers could shower and change after playing golf or tennis into their dinner clothes. There was a barber chair and an attendant to accommodate the gentleman's needs, such as a shave, haircut, or a shoe shine. The entrance to the men's locker room was at the door with the curved top that you can see just over the back of the automobile. That door is no longer there. The women's locker room was much smaller and located just inside the north wing. They did have showers and changings area, but not nearly the plush accessories as the men's did. Women would use the main clubhouse entrance and go through the office area to access their locker room. The grill room was accessible to guests through both main entrance lobby and the south wing rooms. Both locker rooms had doors to it. Guests were served beverages and sandwiches at the grill. They could play cards and relax in the comfortable chairs. A dumbwaiter at the back of the men's locker room brought food down from the second floor kitchen to the grill room. This room is now the fireplace lounge at the lodge. Some guests enjoyed stepping through the French doors to the open veranda at the east of the room. Cocktails were also served out there. The east veranda has since been glassed in, and it's made into an all-season sunroom at the back of the room. The old switchboard was located in the office, and all calls had to be routed through it. The remainder of the first floor has stayed about the same, with the exception of the small telephone room and the library. The telephone room now has a microwave in it for guests in the lodge to use. The library room was just off the lobby and contained books selected personally by Michael McCardle. The office location is the same, as are the guest rooms. Original brochures described the 16 rooms as having 2 charming wooden beds, dressers, soundproof walls, and French cradle-type telephones for local or long-distance calls, and adjoining bathrooms, which was quite unusual at that point because many places had sinks in the rooms, but the bathrooms were communal at the end of the hall. Rooms were also said to have special systems of ventilation, vapor heat in case of cool weather, hot and cold running water, and ice-cold pure water for drinking from the deep well. They featured the American plan, which includes meals with your stay. This was a very common arrangement at this time. The broad stairway in the main entry remains and leads to the second floor. An early brochure describes this upper level as something to exclaim over. The ceiling was open-beamed and went the full east to west length of the building. A massive fireplace and deep, soft davenports and restful chairs give you something to exclaim over. The family crest hung over the fireplace, and the carpet was woven in the family's tartan plaid. The east end of the lounge featured a bridge corner and a raised nook that overlooked Lake Michigan. At the time, you could see the lake from there. And I thought, can you go back to the picture a minute, Jim? I thought this picture was really interesting because it was touched up. And if you look at the back, the trees are drawn in, and there's a sailboat out there and another boat that weren't there, and that was a part of the charm of the room, I guess. The west end was the dance floor, separated from the lounge by large glass doors. Wicker chairs and couches surrounded the smooth, polished floor. And the dance bands were brought in on weekends, and the floor was always crowded. It was one of the most popular spots up here because they always had really great dance bands. To the north side of the big room was the main dining room, featuring 3 meals a day for guests. At Maxwellton, one dined on linen tablecloth, expertly attended. Each group of guests had their own special table. And there were 2 small dining rooms off to the one side that were available for special parties. Each meal was served with crystal goblets of matchless Maxwellton Braze water. The kitchen staff and chef had a new, fully equipped, gourmet, modern kitchen to work in. The food was said to be quite a temptation to gorge and gorge on, heedless of weight or waistline. The kitchen was above the former men's locker room and shower rooms on the first floor. The upper kitchen is still used today for large affairs and catering held in the upper levels. In addition to the golf course, tennis courts for guests were available. They were between the west side of the clubhouse and the 10th fairway, and they're still there today. Tennis guests could also use the locker rooms and services in the clubhouse. And you'll find pickleball being played there today quite regularly. Walking paths were groomed for guests to make their way beyond the clubhouse, along hole 15 to the rocky beach of Lake Michigan. And there were also some that went back the other way along the 16th hole and back into the wooded area there, and you could walk all the way to Bailey's Harbor if you chose. The resort also featured 5 2-unit cottages to the north and east of the clubhouse. All included a living room, 2 bedrooms and bath, with hot and cold running water and electricity. Cottage guests had their meals in the dining room and enjoyed full hotel services. And you'll notice there's no kitchens on any of these plans. That's my kind of a hotel to go to. Some had refrigerators for fruits and mineral water. They were said to be artfully arranged for convenience and comfort. Located to the east side of the property on a path to the lake, they overlook the golf course and Lake Michigan. They have since been taken down and replaced by condos, which are now just east of the clubhouse. There were also 3 housekeeping cottages available. They had furnished kitchens and would accommodate 4 to 6 persons. The brochure said they were only a 5-minute walk to Bailey's Harbor's stores, churches, and post office. Also noted was Bailey's Harbor had a modern laundry completely equipped that would do your laundry at a reasonable charge. They would also pick up and deliver. A small lunchroom called the Wee Inn was constructed at the entrance to the property. It was a quick stopover between the front and back nines, featuring cold drinks, salads, cold sandwiches were also served. A selection of ice cream and pie was also available. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave patrons a view of both nines and the clubhouse while eating at the lunch counter or the small tables. Many young Bailey's Harbor ladies earned their first money as waitresses at the Wee Inn, including my mother. The building was taken down in the late 90s, and the putting green is in its place. A second building along the highway and behind the Wee Inn was the garage. In the early years, it accommodated guests' horses and carriages, and early vehicles, as they became more common, were accommodations that were there also for their chauffeurs. It was also a gathering place for caddies. Today, it serves as the pro shop and cart storage. The first pro at Maxwellton was Arthur Sanders, who Michael became acquainted with during his winter vacations in Mississippi. Mr. Sanders would return to the Edgewater Golf Hotel in Biloxi during the winter months, but spent summers in Bailey's Harbor at Maxwellton. He was assisted by Irvin Nick of Green Bay, who was a coming golfer, popular and efficient. Caddies were common before the advent of golf carts. Many young Bailey's Harbor boys and others from nearby towns served as caddies. Noted memories from the former caddies were recorded at a caddy reunion held in 1992. Charles Tischler remembered there were 125 caddies. Each had to purchase a badge with a number on it for 50 cents, and then they had to turn it in at the end of the season, and they'd get their 50 cents back. They would gather near the tee at number 1 to wait for the caddy master to call their names. Michael's nephew, Jimmy McCardle, was one of the first caddy masters. Some of the boys got steady jobs with regular players and received good tips. In those days, golfers had 30 to 35 clubs, and many would stay a month so they could request a favorite caddy. Gardner Orsted recalled that a boy earned $1 a single bag for 18 holes. Some of the players would tip up to $5, which was a really substantial tip in those days. As the Depression grew deeper, caddy fees were reduced to 50 cents. The caddies went on strike until the rate went back to $1. At the end of each season, a caddy tournament was held, followed by an elegant dinner served in the clubhouse dining room. Tischler also remembered that the golf course was a wonderful thing for Bailey's Harbor. Employment for young people at the resort gave them a chance to help out their families during the hard times of the Depression. Max Welton Braes Resort Hotel and 18-hole golf course officially opened on May 27, 1931. The first 9 holes had been open for a year to the public. The intent of the clubhouse by McCardle was to provide a place for selected members and individual guests to come and enjoy beautiful Door County and get out of the city. He soon found out that he had way too many extra guests of selected members and changed the policy of guests to a public access resort. The resort, as I said earlier, operated on the American plan, and all rates included meals. You could stay in the hotel in one of the rooms with 2 beds for $8 a night per person, or $6 a night if there were 2 people in the room. Cottage started at $12 a day for 2 people. The resort became known for its fine rooms, great golfing, fine dining, and dancing in the evening. Miss Claudia Pereira, formerly of the Edgewater Golf Hotel in Mississippi, was the manager of the resort for many years. She assumed all responsibility for making your visit to Max Welton Braes a pleasant and a happy one. Michael came often and occupied his favorite room at the end of the South Hall at the hotel. A short time after the resort was completed, Michael was able to purchase the property at the end of number 10 that had been his beloved family home. He updated the house and stayed there when visiting. Other times, it was used as one of the cottage rentals. One of the remaining family farm barns on the property was already being used for golf course equipment storage. It still stands behind the number 10 green and continues to be used for equipment. On May 16, 1935, Michael McCardle passed away at the age of 51 in Chicago. Michael had been diagnosed with cancer of the mouth in 1927. He was treated surgically and the small growth was removed. In 1934, McCardle was advised the cancer he thought was eradicated or at least arrested had returned. In 6 months, he realized his disease was terminal. His remains were brought to Max Welton Braes for visitation, followed by a funeral mass at St. Mary of the Lake Church and burial in the St. Mary of the Lake Cemetery on Red Cherry Road. The estate of Michael McCardle ran the resort until Harry Ridings, Michael's nephew, was appointed as manager in 1938. Harry's weekly salary was $50, with an annual income of $2,600, and he also got 3 weeks of vacation. When he went into the service, a caretaker manager kept the resort going through the war years. When Harry returned in 1946, he and his wife Lois purchased the property from the estate. They lived in a very comfortable apartment above the maintenance building behind the clubhouse for many years. And that also has been torn down, and that's where the first condos went in, the new condos. In 1947, Max Belton and Harry Ridings hosted the Wisconsin Open Golf Championship for the first time. The WPGA officials saw the need to stimulate interest in the beautiful Door County vacation land, so Max Welton was chosen for the tournament. On September 8th, 1947, 33 threesomes teed off for the 3-day contest at 6-minute intervals beginning at 9 o'clock. You didn't want to dilly-dally around. The tournament was won by the previous year's champion, Jim Millward of Madison. The tournament returned to the course 3 more times. In 1948, Bailey's Harbor became a National Football League city. The Los Angeles Rams spent 2 weeks of their training camp at Max Welton Braes. A Rams assistant coach lived in Green Bay and recommended the resort as their headquarters. The Rams' schedule that in October included games with Chicago, Green Bay, and Detroit on successive weekends. Harry had special practice fields prepared on fairway number 11, made just east of the clubhouse, complete with goalposts. The 75 members arrived in 3 Greyhound buses from Green Bay on Monday following a game with the Bears. The group included Coach Clark Shaughnessy, assistant coaches, PR staff, and the 41-member team. The Rams' glamour boy at that time was quarterback Bob Waterfield, who was married to Jane Russell. Local folks were very disappointed to learn that the squad traveled stag and they would have no chance to see the glamorous movie star. Their next game was against the Packers, so practices were kept very secret. Rams businessman Bill John had been busy in Sturgeon Bay distributing Rams pennants the week before. Bill Krause, a sports writer for The Advocate, wrote, "The team made the 45-mile trip to Green Bay on Sunday and found Sturgeon Bay residents waving Ram pennants and shouting, 'Go you LA Rams, go!' The Packers beat the Ram that year on October 17th, 42-41. The Rams did not make the playoffs. As evidence of the event, the goalposts were found in the attic when Harry's granddaughter took over management of the resort. After training camp, a landing strip was also established on hole number 11 for some guests' convenience. One May morning of 1983, Lois awoke to the smell of smoke and saw the clubhouse on fire. It burned the kitchen area and the rooms below it. Repairs to the damaged clubhouse were made, and the kitchen was updated. Over the years, they improved and expanded the resort. The rooms and vacation cottages were renovated and upgraded several times. The locker rooms were removed from the clubhouse, and the area converted to a cocktail lounge. The upstairs lounge area was converted to a larger dining area and banquet facilities. Motel accommodations were added at the edge of the woods overlooking the 16th hole. A heated swimming pool was opened off the east side of the clubhouse behind the 15th green. The old McCardle family home was taken down, and the first Max Welton Braes condominiums were built in 1983 at the south edge of the golf course. They were designed to resemble the clubhouse and overlook the fairways. Harry and Lois moved into one of these new units that fall. It was not unusual to see Harry driving his Jaguar around the golf course in the evening, checking sprinklers and the greens. If you stopped at the resort for dinner, you would most likely find Harry and Lois having an evening cocktail and dinner in the clubhouse during in the clubhouse dining room. Their picture with a perfect martini, Harry's favorite alongside it, is displayed in the bar area. On February 8th, 1983, Harry suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 85. Harry served in the Army during World War II, was a charter member of the Bailey's Harbor Lions Club, the Bailey's Harbor Business Association. Mass was celebrated at St. Mary of the Lake Church, and interment was at the cemetery February 13th. Lois Ridings, Harry's wife, took over management of the resort and hired Harry's nephew, Don Kraut, as the manager. In 1997, an early morning golfer on the course saw flames shooting out of the building and called the fire department. About the same time, a cook arriving for the day pounded on Kraut's apartment door to alert him. The fire started in the second-floor dining room, ignited the wall, and quickly spread across the main upstairs dining room and burned through the ceiling. Fire severely damaged the second floor, and water caused extensive damage to the first floor also. Fortunately, none of the hotel rooms was occupied at the time. Firefighters from Bailey's Harbor, Fish Creek, Gibraltar, Egg Harbor, Sister Bay, Liberty Grove, and Sturgeon Bay responded to the blaze. Water was shuffled by tanker from Kangaroo Lake and pumped through a hose from Lake Michigan. They were able to save the building and keep damage to the central areas. Lois never hesitated to announce that the club would be rebuilt and ready for business as usual the next season. On October 18th of 1998, Stephanie Heald Fisher was appointed the new manager of Max Welton Braves Golf Resort. Stephanie has strong ties to the property as she is the granddaughter of Harry and Lois Ridings. Stephanie was the president of Max Welton Braves Incorporated. However, her grandmother retained ownership. Heald Fisher initiated renovation projects on the golf course and announced plans to fix up the cottages, pro shop, and the Wee Inn coffee shop. Additional remodeling would be done in the clubhouse, including adding a few lounge suites and enhancing the newly rebuilt dining and kitchen facilities. She was anxious to restore the facility to again be a Door County jewel, hosting conventions, weddings, and other gatherings. I think you got to give us a click, Jim. There you go. Okay. Lois Ridings passed away on November 28th, 2006, at her winter home in Daytona, Florida. Funeral services were held in Bailey's Harbor at St. Mary of the Lake Catholic Church, and she was buried next to her husband in the church cemetery on Red Cherry Road. In 2001, the Ridings family made a decision to sell Max Welton Braves Golf Resort. The younger family members' lives were taking them in other directions, and the senior generation was aging. The buildings and course had been updated, and they felt the time was right. A group of local businessmen came forward and offered to purchase. After 70 years of ownership by the McArdle family, negotiations were completed, and in June of 2002, the new owners took over. Included in the group were Dale Williams and Keith Bondville of Bailey's Harbor and Dick Dobner of Sister Bay. Mrs. Ridings kept 5 acres and the condos at the south end of the property when the sale was completed. Actually, the Ridings family kept that. The group announced plans for upgrading the clubhouse and other changes to the grounds. The small dining room area at the south side of the ground floor of the building was increased, and the old dining room was moved to the ground floor. They also added a kitchen on the lower level. A new entrance to the bar area was added, and the cocktail lounge was remodeled, giving more seating. Guest bathroom facilities were relocated near the clubhouse offices. The upper clubhouse area is now used for banquets, weddings, and other outings. The older cottages were removed and townhouses were constructed along the 15th and 16th fairways and adjacent wooded areas. The first condo buildings on the grounds were constructed and sold. The buildings fit well into the property and were a great addition to the areas. In addition to that, the areas of 17 acres behind the 17th tee was developed as a secluded wooded single-family home sites. Several holes were adjusted in length, new tee boxes created, and distance markers for blue, white, and red tees were added. In the spring, Jason Dobner was hired as Mack Welton's head pro. The enhancements to the clubhouse and golf course were completed, and the club flourished. Unfortunately, the real estate crash hit and the property went into receivership in 2010. The clubhouse and course were closed, and the future looked bleak. Paul Becker approached the bank with an offer to lease the golf course in the spring of 2010. He successfully operated the 18-hole course for 5 years. The former greenskeepers were hired back, and the course continued to thrive. And this is a picture of Bill. In 2013, Bill Anderson reached an agreement with the bank to purchase the clubhouse and all undeveloped property of the Max Welton Braes Resort. Bailey's Harbor was excited to once again have the resort up and running. Bill and Heather went to work updating the interior of the clubhouse. A full staff was hired to manage the facility, and the common areas were refurbished with items typical of its historical past. Carpet was removed to reveal the original tile floors in the entryway. The pool that had been off the east end was in very poor condition and could not be saved. The pool area was filled. It has become a lovely wedding setting, making Max Welton a complete wedding destination venue. The clubhouse features 3 suites to accommodate families, as well as standard and deluxe rooms. The cottages are duplex units that overlook the 16th fairway and have been remodeled. All still have living room, bedroom, and bath, and a great view of the course. 2 off-site cottages are also available, one on Kangaroo Lake, just down the road from the resort, and the other in Fish Creek. Both can accommodate large groups. The need for food service at the resort was very evident the first year. That was solved by leasing the first floor dining room and cocktail lounge to Pasta Vino, a very popular local Italian restaurant. The restaurant took on a great Italian decor, and their reputation followed them as it again became a very popular dining spot. A breakfast and lunch menu was still missing until 2015. The former Sandpiper restaurant in Bailey's Harbor was reincarnated. The former staff began serving their great breakfast and lunch menu in the upper dining room of the clubhouse. Guests and town people were delighted to have the Lake Michigan pancake and the other Sandpiper offerings back in Bailey's Harbor. Weddings and small conventions and other gatherings were being booked for the large upstate hall continuously. An event planner service was offered that included catered foods, servers, and other enhancement. Max Welton Braes Golf Resort was back. In 2017, Pasta Vino moved its operations back to Sister Bay, as they had 2 other restaurants there and needed to have them all closer. Click again, please. No, click again, please. Jim, click again, please. Thank you. Anderson contacted Tana Gagliardo and Carl Bradley of Time Catering and invited them to lease the restaurant and lounge. Time had been doing event catering at the resort already. Click. Thank you. Tana and Carl jumped at the idea, and in spring of 2017, Time Cuisine opened at Max Welton Braes. They also brought the Sandpiper crew downstairs to serve breakfast as part of the Time Cuisine family. In addition, they are now open for a great lunch An after golf menu for folks finishing a round of golf in the afternoon was installed, and it's been very well received. Over the winter of 2014-15, Max Welton Braes Golf Course welcomed new owners, Jim Bresnahan and his family of Wausau. During the golf season, the Bresnahans live in a condo in Ellison Bay. Bresnahan and his wife Janine, both avid golfers, have been coming to Door County since 1977. When he retired in spring of 2014, he said he began looking for something to do that was not work, and Max Welton Braes fit the bill. I hope he still believes that. The family felt buying Max Welton Golf would be a good opportunity and a way they could preserve a bit of local history. I've always admired and liked Max Welton Braes. We wanted to make sure it had some stability, Jim said. Bresnahan kept the name of the golf course. It's got a rich history, and we'd like to keep that intact, he said. He used the first year to learn about the clientele and find out what visitors wanted. Much of the previous staff was retained to make a smooth changeover. Daughter Erin Bresnahan is participating and learning the business of management responsibilities for the golf course. Jim expects Erin will take over the course in 10 to 15 years when he's ready for a second retirement. Jim is intent on making ongoing improvements to the course. This year, new pull carts and a fleet of new motorized carts were added. Several men's leagues and the Bonnie Braes ladies are happy to have Max Welton as their home course again. A couples Sunday event is planned every month and has been very well received. Included are 9 halls of best ball golf, followed by dinner and prizes at a local restaurant. Many group golf outings are held annually at the course, and it brings golfing visitors from all of the United States to our beautiful town of Bailey's Harbor. We Bailey's Harbor golfers are all happy to have them here. This brings us to the end of the story as it exists today. Many things have changed, but the charm and mystique of Max Welton Braes remain the same. As many of you may know, my roots run very deep at Max Welton Braes. My great-grandparents, James and Nancy McCardle, farmed the land in the 1800s. My grandparents, Jim and Anna McCardle, lived on the farm until they moved to town in 1920. My mother was born on the land in 1916. Michael W. McCardle was my grandfather's brother and my great-uncle, and Harry Ridings was a cousin. My late aunts, Jeanette and Catherine McCardle, kept meticulous notes on Max Welton over its many years, saving me lots of research to put this story together. I'm sure they are happy to have the legacy passed along again. I have truly enjoyed sharing Max Welton Braes and its history with you tonight. Special thanks to my husband, Jim, for keeping me focused and being my official picture clicker tonight. Thanks also to the Andersons, the Bresnahans, Tana Gagliardo, and Carl Bradley from Time Cuisine, and staff at Max Welton, and the Bailey's Harbor Historical Society for inviting me to present this program. Thanks to all of you for coming, and just remember, if you see a hoop snake, just shake a stick at it and it will grow back into the woods. Grandpa Jim said so. Click it. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. I didn't ask, does anybody have any questions that I can answer or maybe try to answer? Good. Hope you all get over and take a look at the course because it really is beautiful. And right now it's in gorgeous condition with all the rain we've had. So thank you.
Well, Chris, again, I can't thank you enough for doing a wonderful program. This is actually our last program this summer. The only thing that's remaining for the Historical Society is we will be planning a members' brunch around the middle of September. So keep your eyes peeled on your emails if you're a member. And if you aren't a member, you can be a member. We have membership forms at the back table along with some wonderful blank greeting cards of paintings by local artist Cynthia McGuire that are priced so reasonably you won't even believe. And if you're interested in any past program DVDs, those are also available. Further, Laddie, our videographer, Laddie Chapman, will have this program available online in a couple of days. If somebody missed it but still wanted to see it, just go to Bailey's Harbor Historical Society.org. Well, I may not get that up in a couple of days, but he'll have it on YouTube. So I'm sure if you just type in Max Walton Braze, I don't think you'll have too much trouble finding it. Before you leave, I would just like to remind you that we always have little jars available if you feel that you have an urge to contribute a few dollars to the Historical Society. We really appreciate it, because doing things like having Laddie Chapman here to film our shows and getting them online and supporting the website and other things we do, sometimes, we have to finance it. So, we'll appreciate anything that you can do to help with that. I think we've had a great season this summer, starting with a super successful class reunion for the Bailey's Harbor School. Last month, I explained about the Brand family in early Bailey's Harbor, and ending it off with Max Walton Braze, just kind of made it a real variety of shows, and I think they were all pretty doggone good. So thank you so much for coming. Does anybody have any questions I could answer about the Historical Society?
No, but I'd like to make a statement.
Oh, Howard would like to make a statement. Hope it's going to be a good statement, Howard.
Yeah, it'll be a good statement.
Okay.
All of you people that have enjoyed the programs don't realize the importance of this lady.
Oh, stop.
Now, I know she said, oh, stop. But those of us who are set on the board and do some decision-making, just follow her plans. Now, I have been in a lot of organizations over my lifetime, but I've never been in one that's been run like this. Please do the donations, because money is, as we all know, has to have money. Join the organization and become active, because we're going to need some more new board members as well as other people. But this all, please stand up and give Leanne a real hand as being president for all these years.
Well, thank you so much. See, I sort of come from the school of thought that if you don't take the credit, you don't take the blame. So that's kind of my modus operandi. But thank you very much. And Howard, that was really sweet of you. Thank you very much. And I guess you are all dismissed.